Today on the Pro-Life Podcast, well, how many human rights violations does China have? Well, let me count the ways. You know what? We need to talk about this. Pull up a chair. Let's get started. Happy Thursday, Pro-Life family. Welcome to the table. We have much to discuss today. I'm joined by some of my favorite people around the table.
Hello, I'm Veronica Arnold-Smither.
Dr. John Seago, President of Texas Right to Life.
Dr. President, good to have you in today. Yep. How was that drive in from Austin?
Yeah. It's delightful.
Right. He's sorry to drag you into the Houston traffic, but we have things to discuss. We are talking about China, and we're going to keep it to the short list of human rights atrocities today that relate to the pro-life movement. That doesn't narrow it down that much. Mm-hmm. But we've been talking about doing this episode for some time. Veronica, you've been really amped up to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, we all hate this list of things, but you've been like, we need to do this episode for like months.
I'm definitely really passionate about it. I mean, when people think of pro-life issues in China, you definitely jump to the one-child policy and the subsequent policies and the Uyghur situation.
The Uyghur situation is
the
nuts.
Current horrible discrimination and like death camps and everything that they're going through. So we're going to just talk about those today.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe get some tissues.
Well, let's start with the one-child policy. Yeah. Okay. That's the one everybody's pretty much heard of this thing being a thing in China, and this happened in the 70s.
Well, yeah, it really got started in the 50s.
Right.
It was more of a propaganda motto to change society in China because they were worried about societal collapse. Their population doubled within a decade, and so the world leaders and definitely the Chinese leaders were worried. And so they disseminated this motto around Chinese society called late, long, and few. And it was all about waiting a long time to have kids and to have very few. And it was actually working. I was reading this article on how stuff works about what would have happened if there had never been a one-child policy officially enacted. And they were talking about how this motto or propaganda was actually working. They were able to cut their birth rate in half. It was about like 5.9 when they started this motto, and it cut it down to like 2.9.
Wow.
And so how stuff
that's
works.
That's a big jump.
Yeah, it really is. I think the Chinese people were actually on board. I mean, you can debate the ethics of this all you want, but the Chinese people seemed to be in agreement that this was an issue they were concerned about too, and they were following through with having smaller families. And so the How Stuff Works website was talking about how, this policy was working so well that why did they even enact an official policy and start enforcing it really hard in the 70s about one-child policy?
Yeah.
And that's when all the true atrocities began, like sterilization and forced abortion. And
right. And this is not, unrelated to the bigger kind of movement of population control. Like, from in those decades, you're talking about 50s to 70s, there was this kind of global conversation about, what can, humans are the problem, and so,
we're always the bad guy.
And like, more humans and all these, doomsday predictions about, out of control populations.
Right.
Obviously, we had strands of that take hold in the United States. But so there was this kind of accepted amongst the elites and the government leaders, this accepted idea of more people is bad and we have to do something drastic. So it's not surprising. I'm surprised just that the early propaganda itself was so effective.
Yeah, I was too. I hadn't really heard about that until I started researching for this episode.
Yeah. Do you know what the justification was? Was it for economic success? Was it for the strength of the country?
A little bit of all of that, but mostly resources. They were very worried about being able to sustain farmlands for that many people. Okay. And I guess there really wasn't much of a discussion about moving outside of the country, but that being that it's been communist forever, that's always discouraged in China. It's like, no, you stay here within the motherland. And so I think they were really worried about resources. And But we've also seen in other countries that they usually just increase resources in very amazing new technological
Right.
ways. So it's like, well, that we could talk about that later too. That's not really for today, but it's interesting to think about just limiting one aspect of their lives to smaller families may have been completely unnecessary in order to sustain the population. They could have found new ways to farm and new ways to build technology and make life easier. But the craziest part is in the 70s when they really started enforcing the one-child policy. And I mean, the absolute horror stories that we hear that come out of that. And we've booked a few speakers who escaped China and talk about what it was like. One in particular we've worked with before named Lisa Smiley. Her family raised 5 daughters, she's one of them, in secret. And they moved out to the country to be as secluded as they could, and they befriended the local police so that the police would help protect them.
Oh, wow.
And they were able to hide for a really long time, but then finally they were no longer able to hide. And so the neighbors helped get them to New Zealand to escape the country before they were literally going to be imprisoned. Their daughters were going to be taken to concentration camps.
Oh my gosh.
And so Lisa Smiley talks about, like escaping China and moving to New Zealand. And then eventually she moved to the US and she helps share her story. And it's just amazing and shocking. And I'm so glad she made it. But then she talks about all these other families who didn't make it. And the ones the mothers were dragged out of their homes and forced to abort. And just the screaming in the night. She talks about literally hearing screaming in the night of people who are trying to hide their pregnancies for the love of their child, and they're forced to abort. And there's actually even a few more recent videos, because this was she's about 35 years old. There's some more recent stories too that are filmed because of the rise of social media and the ability to film things on your phone. I mean, people being dragged out of their apartments. This is on YouTube. I mean, it's really dark stuff, but I've seen some of the videos myself of people being dragged out to an abortion clinic. And then sometimes it's such a botched situation that the women die. Yeah. I mean, it's horrible.
So they go from propaganda, to an actual enforcing a policy.
Yeah.
That each family can only have one child. And it's just like, it's just so... that leap of even kind of going down this philosophy of, okay, population, we should message on this.
Right.
That's one thing. But then, like, for a government to see people as, like, the problem, like, it's citizens. We think about, I don't know, it's just kind of like there was nobody in the room that was like, hey, guys, we can kind of predict where this is going, like, economically, as far as it's just like there was no hesitation on, to actually enforce this policy.
Like, did it not occur to them that these problems would happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually Googled this morning, did anyone in China predict that this was a problem? Yeah. And of course, the articles I'm reading are in English, so maybe if I could read Chinese, I would find better answers. Okay. But I could not find anything about Chinese people discussing the potential problems. It was all about other countries discussing what China was doomed to experience.
Really, the party's not really in favor of dissenting voices.
Right.
No, they're not.
They have a habit of cutting people's heads off when they dissent. So
yes. I just think, like, from the pro-life perspective, it's just crazy because, like, we talk about the hard cases or pregnancies in difficult circumstances, and the pro-life answer is always like, life is to be celebrated no matter what. Like, even in the worst circumstances, like, out of, a sinful situation or a broken home or something, whatever it is, like, life is a gift from the Lord. And so, for someone to be pregnant, that is something to celebrate. That's something to draw near, to support. And so it's like, this is not, obviously we have like a Christian lens for this, but this is not foreign to like the human experience. It's like, you can, as a government, can think of, for us to be successful, we have to keep having children. We have to have a future as a country. And so it's just like, yes, we have the lens of pro-life and the lens of the, Christian kind of scripture, but it just is, it's common sense stuff. I guess that's just kind of
well, and it's so interesting. I was going to make a similar point. It's like, we have to remember the people involved in the actual human rights atrocities, but also it's simple math. Like, you can remove all of the of the very necessary Christian lens to view all of this and just look at the math for a minute.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a joke. It's like, did no one calculate the formulas for the birth rate? I mean, it's essential that it's 2.1, and they had a goal of it being 1.9. Did they not think about what that meant?
1.
Right. Well, they wanted to limit the population. I guess they might have had an eventual goal of raising the birth rate but they indoctrinated society so well to having such small families that now they're having what they call this 4-2-1 problem, or economists around the world are calling it a 4-2-1 problem. And what this means is that one child is now expected to support their 2 parents on top, if you can see my fingers, and then their 4 grandparents on top.
Yeah.
And this is an almost impossible situation. And so there's these cartoonists are drawing these crazy memes and pictures about like a little baby with the 2 parents on top and then the 4 grandparents on top. It's impossible. There's not enough money. There's not enough housing. There's not enough anything to support the situation.
So China had one-child policy. At some point, they realized one child.
A little bit too late.
So how did they move on from that? Because I feel like there was a faster.
Well, you would think they would have noticed sooner, but it was not until 2015 that they relaxed it to the 2-child policy.
Okay.
And I mean, the world had been talking about.
So we're not going to stop this
long?
kind of law. We're just going to amend it.
I know, and people were like, first of all, you should, just abolish it completely. Mm-hmm. Don't just relax the policy. It was wrong in the first place.
Yeah.
And the 2-child policy is not enough to fix the problems, just economically speaking. It's never going to fix all the trauma and all the horrible atrocities that happen, but it's also not enough to fix economic problems.
Yeah.
Well, then sweet irony came into play. People didn't start having larger families. They just didn't. They were so used to the small family. They were used to...
That was like a cultural norm.
It is. They grew up as only children, and now they don't want more than one. Yeah.
They were not used to having siblings or lots of cousins or anything like that. They also liked the ability to spend money on one child instead of having to distribute it amongst many. And so it was still a huge issue. And so people were joking like, well, that was super effective. And so in 2021, China changed it to a 3-child policy. It was like, whoop-de-doo, the 2-child policy worked so well. Yeah. So now what they're doing is, this happened to Russia a while back too. Yeah. They're paying families to have children. They're subsidizing them. And now people are demanding like daycare options and all this stuff because they're like, well, if you want us to have kids, well, you better provide daycare options and all these other problems that China has just completely been unaware of.
Let me just contrast this. There was this really funny bill that was filed in we're at our legislative session in Austin. Our legislative team is working in the Texas Capitol. There was a bill that was filed to reward big families. So on your property taxes. And so if you have 4 children, you get like a certain percentage off of your property tax. And it goes up with each additional child. It goes up. So if you have 10 children, like you don't pay any property taxes. And
I like this plan.
Yes, yes. So like, and it's and already like liberal media is like making fun of this. Is like, this is, imposing, Christian values in law and like all they're going nuts.
It's like, but kids are expensive and every tax break you can get is nice.
Well, and children are important for the state.
Yes.
I just like from just a government standpoint, like we need. So anyway, it's just funny, like
because
you're
not
seeing
everybody.
Kind of like the opposite of what the Chinese policies. You're seeing the opposite by some of our good like pro-life members that are like, hey, let's actually reward families for having.
Because there's a lot of people who are going to be like, no, we're good. 2 kids, we're good. And that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But then those of us who are like, let's have a few more.
Yeah, the rep that filed it, he was like, this doesn't apply to me. I only have 2 kids.
Right.
So I'm not, he was like, this is not for me. And he was like, but he's like, I've got great homeschool families in my district.
They average, like 13 kids, it'd be really nice.
I think
some tax
the bill
breaks.
should just keep going. And so if you have 13 kids, you get like 30%. Like back. Like you're actually, I'm just kidding.
I'm all for no taxes ever, but that's never going to happen.
Tangents. All right, we'll wrap up this tangent off camera. We'll come back. We need to talk about some of the more recent, really horrific abuses of human rights. So we'll come back in just a minute. Texas Right to Life is facing 14 lawsuits from Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. They're suing us because we helped pass the Texas Heartbeat Act, and they're trying to scare us pro-lifers into backing down. Please join us in the fight against Planned Parenthood and donate to protect the Texas Heartbeat Act. You can fight for the unborn and build a pro-life Texas that values every human life. Go to texasrighttolife.com/lawsuit to make your contribution. Every cent will help, and it's greatly appreciated.
Without warning, you or your loved one could end up in the emergency room where every second counts and your medical wishes matter more than ever. However, if your loved one doesn't have the right medical documents on hand, they may not be able to make decisions for you in a crisis. My Life Angels solves all of this by walking you through step by step in creating these important medical documents and storing them online securely for you and your family to access at any time. The service is only $7 a month, but use the link in our description for 20% off your initial subscription period. Don't let strangers make life and death decisions for you. Get the My Life Angels app today.
Welcome back, friends. So we wanted to discuss. I don't want to discuss this. We need to discuss this. I also had to look up the pronunciation. Uyghurs. It's a group of people in China. And recently, last few years, China has committed some really serious atrocities: forced sterilization, forced abortions. Subject at least 80%. Sorry, this headline I'm reading. 80% of women of childbearing age in the rural southern region to intrusive birth prevention surgeries, IUDs, sterilizations, and then the abortions. And this,
And that's just
China.
the beginning.
Seriously. So,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah, I believe this group mostly practices the Muslim religion. Is that right?
I believe
and
so.
China is very discriminatory against all religions.
All religions. I mean, the only
Very
way, like we were
oppressive.
talking about these opinions in the last segment, these through the Christian lens.
Mhm.
And yeah, the way you push this kind of stuff through, you have to get rid of all
I mean,
that kind of opinion.
Yeah, the Chinese Communist Party, obviously dedicated to secular worldview, and sees any kind of spiritual practice, even if it's a minority, as a threat to the religion of choice is
Communism.
the CCP. Yeah, I mean the Chinese Communist Party. That's supposed to place, that's supposed to be what gives you meaning. That's supposed to be, what unites communities. That's supposed to be the most important thing in your life is, honoring the party, obeying the party. So it's like any kind of religious affiliation or commitment is going to be a threat.
Yeah. And Muslims tend to be very conservative and very anti-abortion. And so this is just awful.
Yeah.
They're rounding them up, putting them in concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to trying to sterilize them in mass and forcing abortions and all of that, it's been proven that they're harvesting organs from this population of the Uyghurs and having them transported across the world, mostly to serve the CCP again, but also if you can pay for an organ and get on the top of a waiting list, it's already been proven that they're being sourced from this completely oppressed population, literally locked up in a concentration camp. And it's horrible. It's like, I thought we were done with this. This happened in the 40s. Did no one learn their lesson? But it's happening again.
So a lot of countries have forced organ donation systems. Like it's like this is something that is a problem like in the world, whether it's specific groups targeted. The difference here, though, and the reason it's gotten so much attention, there's some great documentaries on it. This always comes up at our bioethics conferences, whether it's a Christian Christian group or not, is that it is like industrial, like level of conspiracy and system. I mean, it's an industrial kind of system to, have all of this forced organ donation. And so, even to the point where you go into a medical center and you're, have some unrelated medical complication, you will be, put under and wake up and realize that you had, been forcefully, without consent, without any discussion, that they had taken a kidney. And so it's like, this is well documented. This is not conspiracy theory, but it is like, just the number of hospitals that are popping up around the country, for this purpose is not to, not to better the health of that community, but as kind of like
to steal
a supply.
organs.
Yeah, this is a new supply line. So it's really, amazing. And organ donation. We talk about organ donation here a lot, but it can be a life-giving, gift. It can be something that's very beautiful. It's I think one of the popes talked about, like, it is a great embodiment of Christ's love to give yourself to them. That, and so there are situations where like organ donation is a great blessing.
Right.
It's a great opportunity. But like, this is none of that. This
Right.
is forced.
Right.
This is without consent. And obviously, the well-being of the donor is, not in the consideration at all. And so it's actually life-ending. It's harmful, but it's also life-ending in some of these victims. And so it's just amazing. And it's not like just pro-lifers are saying this. It's
I just want to go back and make sure everybody heard. This is being discussed at bioethics conferences, right? Not sci-fi horror movies.
Yeah.
Because that's where my brain goes. That's where I've seen that before, is really scary movies. This is a thing that happens in the world.
Yep.
It's crazy too.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, kind of similar point to the one-child policy too. If you remove for just a second all the concerns about human rights abuses and just think about the numbers and the math again, follow the money, essentially, it makes sense why they would want to do this. The organ transplant market is a huge moneymaker. Yeah. And so they are literally creating a supply chain to make money off of selling people's body parts. And it makes sense when you think about the CCP is so worried right now, and they're not ready to admit it in the slightest. They're very worried about complete economic collapse. Like, their country is about to go upside down very, very soon. And perhaps that's why they're being so forceful about all kinds of things around the world right now. They're possibly trying to distract everybody from the fact that they're about to go bankrupt. Yeah. So they're creating a supply chain and making millions of dollars. Or you can Google the monetary value of different organs for transplant, and it's in the millions and billions. It's insane.
Yeah. And so this is not even just for, this is not just like targeting one minority group for the rest of the country. Like, these are for people coming to China people are coming to China for organ donation, to receive an organ transplant. And so it is, like you said, the economic incentive is that they've created this industry where people from other countries, were on waiting lists. They go to China.
Oh, that reminds me of how people there was a huge trend to go to India for pregnancy surrogacy for a long time. And now it's go to China for an organ transplant. And it used to be, good news. It's like, come to the U.S. for the best cancer treatment ever. Now it's like, go to these other places for heinous, horrible activities.
Yeah. It's like we decide, this is an unethical practice, and China goes, hold my beer. It's just like watch this. We can do it, and we can make it an industrial grade.
Yeah. So I think it's easy to say, okay, China is doing this. That in that worldview is obviously we said it's a secular perspective, and so bodies, human bodies don't have any value. Like humans, so we're no different than any other animals. We're no different than, a tree. It's a resource. And so from a government lens, people are resources. Now, it's funny that the two things we're talking about.
That's such a terrifying rabbit hole to go down.
Well, and so, that's just how, that's the worldview. But this kind of thing is also in discussions of organ donation generally. Even in the United States, there have been, policies recommended or proposed that would make every citizen an automatic organ donor. Whether you want to or not, you're an organ donor, and you actually have to opt out.
Right.
And the underlying assumption there is like, your body doesn't really belong to you. It's a resource that the community could use from. So it's not that gift of love. It's
Right.
not that it's not that kind of self-giving. It is now, a commodity for everyone else. It belongs to the state. And so now, thankfully, this trend has not taken off, but it is discussed and argued that this is the best policy to have because we have a huge, shortage of organ donors based on, people getting on the waiting list. That list is just getting longer and longer every year, and there's no way we can keep up with it. And so there's a huge, gap between people on the waiting list and people who are actually donating. And so all of these unethical proposals are coming out are coming into the conversation of how can we get more organs? And thankfully consent is, informed consent is still central to our medical ethics here in the United States, but
we still tried as best we can to live by a democratic republic in this country. So that helps.
Well, I do like the technological advancements have been made with almost like 3D printing organs. And I think,
Just blew my mind a little.
Crazy, like 3D, like
in the Fifth
3D
Element.
printing. So not quite that far, but I think at some point we do almost get there, which that's a whole nother crazy rabbit hole to go down. But yeah,
no, but that's important because that is a better solution.
Yes.
Right now, I was just reading some stuff about xenotransplantation, and so taking animal parts, and so there's been a lot of promise in parts of the heart from pigs.
Yeah.
And so but I'm kind of looking at it.
I have a good friend who's got a heart valve that's from a pig.
Okay, well, this is not just the
Yeah.
valve. This is growing and genetically modifying the whole heart. And so
Intense.
Okay. So, but even then, that's not going to overcome, that's not going to make up the gap. So the artificial, synthetic biology is a very promising, obviously all of these technologies have have ethical concerns, but
they are all tools.
That is a better, a more promising
development. Yes.
So,
I feel much better about that. Hey, we went to a lab, we printed this thing, we did some genetic tweaking, so it works for you, and here you go.
Yeah.
And
my skeptical brain, though, loves to think of any potential problem that could come out of this, though. But
what do you mean?
said,
Humans have a terrible history of taking a tool and using it for terrible
destruction.
Things? Like nuclear power.
Well, in any movie from the 80s about robots and all that. But yeah, it's a tool. I love
80s,
I do too,
80s,
but they're coming true and it's
90s,
but
2000s, 2010s,
Stop.
2020. Yeah.
But yeah, any tool can be used for good or for evil, and any tool. And so it is so important to think about these super useful tools. That's so cool about your friend. I did not know that. You actually have a valve from a pig heart. Because what a great way to avoid so many ethical problems. I'm just thinking about cloning and AI. So yeah, we'll just stop there.
Let's stop there. Let's stop there. Sup, Sydney? How's it going? If you don't know what that means, little Google. You'll
Good for
see.
you for now. Too many
Good for you for not
jokes.
knowing. Sorry.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Well, I just have one final thought / question is how do we get China to stop all of this? I mean, we have our own problems we need to worry about too, but
We do. But
it's hard not to think about how do we make it stop? How do we make it stop? And does anyone have any
it would be
ideas?
easy to say, yes, we have our own problems, but any life lost is a tragedy.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of efforts, even in the Texas Capitol. There's been, resolutions passed condemning, these practices of China. That's important. Speaking the truth is important.
Mm-hmm.
And
I guess they're symbolic measures, but they're still disseminating information. That's helpful.
Yeah,
Right.
and some of these things it's hard to believe if you don't actually look at it. So continuing to speak, tell the truth, speak, and try to meet new audiences. Because even if you're at these bioethics conferences, these these activists that come in, they present on this. It's very few people in that room are pro-life when it comes to abortion, but they see this as wrong. This is a human rights violation, and so continuing to push there. I'm not holding my breath for the UN to do anything.
Yeah, they're not going to act
it's
quickly to declare genocide the way that the U.S. eventually
isn't China
said.
on the Human Rights Committee?
Yeah.
So you have it limited, but I think what we can do: continue to speak the truth, continue to talk about these things. If for nothing else, as a kind of to raise awareness for these trends that are right here in our backyard, for that same mentality that we are susceptible to, whether it's devaluing the human body,
Yeah.
whether it's, ignoring individual rights for the good of all. I mean, it's like these are important, principles that we have to defend and, really maintain here in Texas as well, in the United States. But, speaking the truth is always, always our calling. So.
Yeah. That reminds me of one final story, I guess.
Okay.
When it was made public that the Uyghur population was being completely oppressed and locked up in concentration camps, it was also right before the new live action movie Mulan was about to come out. They were in China, or I should say Disney was filming the movie in China.
Yeah.
And so the U.S. and some probably other nations too were like, stop filming in China. They were even filming very near to the Uyghur population and saying, this you need to boycott this. China, it needs to be declared a genocide. You need to stop cooperating with them. But it was amazing to see what a foothold the CCP has on Disney.
Yeah.
That was a big wake-up call for people. There's a lot of monetary connection between Disney and the CCP. And so they continued to film in China. They did not back out. They released the movie, and a lot of people were really, really upset about it. And that alone actually raised a lot of awareness.
Yeah,
but
there's also
didn't
something
solve any problems.
Right. Yeah, there's also something with the NBA. The NBA is expanding.
The NBA has a huge presence in China.
Yeah, and that's like a huge economic. So it's like there have been, team owners and players and stuff that are, asked by reporters, like, how can you make this partnership? And, are for the almost ignoring, not speaking the truth, not being honest.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, in the movie industry, like you see, not just Disney, but when you have a country that has 2 billion potential viewers, you want the movie to do well internationally. That's how you get it to do well internationally. You have to cater to an audience. So it comes back around to us, but with your dollars.
Right. Yeah.
Right? That's
buy local if you can.
What can we do as Americans about these atrocities? We have to vote with our dollars.
I keep thinking of things to say.
Go for it. We got a few more minutes.
I've had a few different friends over the years who migrated from China to the U.S. And I've asked them asked people a few things over the years, like, what did you think about this happening in China? And I was amazed that a lot of them don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't know what's going on. And because the news is so censored there, and so they're really quite unaware, and their mentalities have been formed for decades now, generationally, on what to think and who to talk to and what to talk about, and so they were quite overwhelmed and shocked. I remember actually when I was a student, doing pro-life work, doing kind of like man on the street interviews, and there were a lot of international students at A&M where I went to school, and plenty of them were from China. And we'd ask them what their opinions on abortion were. And they were like, what's abortion? And because whether they'd been through it, forced to have one or not, they basically didn't know it existed.
Yeah.
And because everything's very covered up. And so they didn't know about the Uyghur population either. It's very strange. And so I want to be careful never to sound like I'm opposing Chinese people, right?
Yeah,
like, it's
yeah.
so
Right.
easy for some leftists to say, oh, you're a racist. It's like, no. I'm opposed to the CCP and their horrible atrocities and their human rights abuses. But these Chinese people are innocent, and they've been locked up in this horrible situation.
Yeah.
And so
often those are the victims. I mean, those are the women that are harmed by these policies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pray for China.
Definitely. Well, friends, I think that's about all the time we have for today. Lots to discuss. You've got some research to go do now on the other things. There's a multitude of other things we could have discussed, but we are out of time. So, friends, share with your friends and neighbors. Have these hard conversations. They're not always fun, but they are necessary. So we change hearts and minds and save lives. We will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.